Hello, everybody. We'll just give it a few minutes for everybody to get in here. I think I'll just give it a couple more minutes. Okay, Yanni, what do you think I should give it a minute, or think we should go?
Yeah, I think we can start.
Okay. Um. Okay. So obviously, thanks for coming, everybody. For you guys who don't know me, I'll introduce myself really fast. My name's Dirk, or my real name is Brandon. Um, I have like a math, computer science background, and I've been doing blockchain dev, experimenting in it for roughly a year. Yanni had reached out to me and asked me to help. Um, Primarily, I'm going to be helping coordinate developers across the working groups, doing technical writing, and then contributing to some of the development work when we get there. So, the purpose of this call today is to try to have a little bit more like focused or detailed discussion and elaborate on the primitives people in this core dev group want to build or are already building. So I know we have like a few, rough working groups in the Discord, but the idea here is to really like talk about the details behind those ideas, and then we'll after that discussion, I will personally attempt to sort of like summarize them, and the goal is to create like a vision document almost that serves as the guiding light or like technical specification for what we would like to build. So um, I don't know if you guys have probably heard of Paradigm and like read some of their research articles, so I'll post one quickly in the general chat. Is that these aren't necessarily, they don't necessarily go over like everything, but they're detailed enough to talk about the challenges that some of these, what we're trying to build, the challenges of what we're trying to build, maybe how we overcome them. What are the current solutions out there, and why do they not? What do they do well? What do they not do well? So I guess a good kind of thing to think about is becoming um, a parallel of this for like blockchain gaming on Starknet. And then the idea is to, take these vision documents and sort of get them up to a point where then they can serve as the basis for the working groups to try to like build those products. So what I would like to do today is go over some of these product, like we'll talk about these product visions and go over them and ask questions and talk about what's out there, and like I'll be taking notes the whole time, and then hopefully that will snowball into forming the basis for this. um, so I asked Guilty Gyoza if he could elaborate a little bit about like his idea of solve to mint and that project to kick us off. And then after that, and after we have a good discussion about that, and people can ask questions, and we can talk about it and get a lot of good stuff written down, I'll open the floor up and maybe we move on to one or two other topics. I know a lot of people have interest in like BRF or wallets, anything's kind of fair game. I would like to really start elaborating on uh, details these uh, of these primitives. So, Yanni or Swag, if you guys don't have anything else, I'll pull Guilty up here.
I just have one thing to add. Something that we thought would be good kickoff would be to start from an application and then to go generalize instead of starting generalize. So with what Guilty is now going to introduce, the DAO itself can use in order to attract more developers potentially, and then we can have nonsense, speaking about the VRF and specific applications for that, and then like if any other person here would like to speak about other thing that he wants to create, then we'll open the stage for him as well.
Go ahead, Guilty, if you're ready.
Sure. Yeah, happy to talk about some ideas I have toward solving puzzles to mint NFTs, and I hope that can become a starting point for giving recognition to Cairo developers and competitors. Let me elaborate. Solve to mint is a frivolous term that I coined for this concept, where NFT is minted as a solution to a puzzle that you solve. So let me give you a concrete example. I have a proof of concept 3D rigid body business engine already written in Cairo, and we can build a snooker game or simplified snooker game where you have a axis aligned boundaries within which you have a couple of circles and player control the white circle, and the goal is to supply a momentum to the white circle to bounce off on other colored circles, and so you find a solution as long as you score a non-zero point. And scoring is defined by move the colored circle into certain areas on the board, such as the corners of the game board. And the interesting thing about this is that as the NFTs, as the creator of this project, I do not know, or I can choose to, or let me be precise. I think it will be non-obvious how scarce the NFT is, because the scarcity of NFT is defined by how big the solution space is, right? So every solution is defined by a initial momentum supplied to the player ball, to the player circle, such that by the end of the game, because there's friction at work in the game scene, every circle comes to a rest. At the end of game, you score non-zero, then you have a solution. And every solution only leads to one NFT mix. If you supply momentum and find a solution. However, that has been found and already recorded in a ledger on chain, then you don't mint that NFT. Right? So one solution equals one NFT. So the scarcity of the NFT is equivalent to how many solutions there are in the game, and because there's a fixed point numerical system, right? So solution is finite. And this is interesting in the sense that you're actually gating the right to mint NFTs with sort of knowledge with physics, or if you can think adversarially, you can actually run off-chain physics simulation to find solution, and then you submit a solution on-chain. That also is an interesting sort of threshold. You don't actually bid on NFTs and pay to get NFTs. You have to sort of run simulations numerically in order to mint something. Yeah, so that's the concept, and happy to jam about ideas.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Anybody can raise their hand, by the way. We'll pull you up for the discussion. So, um, a starting question I guess I had here was I think this is cool, right? Because it's not a puzzle. It's not like a riddle where you can just inspect someone else's solution that's been submitted on chain and resubmit it, basically like copy their answer, right? Um, and you don't even need any sort of like cryptography or obfuscating sort of technology because once the solution's gone, it's gone. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So, for example, a solution might be a tuple where you have the value of the x
Hmm.
component of the momentum and the y component of the momentum, and you supply that to the planar circle, right? That basically is a solution. And actually, to add color to your statement, where you cannot just look at records on chain and copy solutions, we can add one more layer to this concept, which is this thing called a solution family, or a family of solution.
Hmm.
So when you supply momentum and you set the all the circles into action, you can define an event as any collision between any two rigid bodies. And rigid body is whether a circle or whether the one of the four walls of the axis line boundaries. And if you record the sequence of collision events from start to finish, this sequence is um, characterizes the family to which the solution belongs. Right. So, for example, I can discover a solution, and it is tied to a sequence of collision events. I would imagine people scour this solution record and perturb the initial momentum. Because if you perturb it, you probably will also score non-zero and you will find a solution. But because the sort of the OG solution of this entire family has been found, other perturbed solution is of less value. And of course, you can on-chain record, which address found which OG solution of the given family at which block, etc. So that determines between the
Hmm.
OG, solution discoverer and the derivatives.
No, I love the idea. Like I'm immediately like thinking of like all these different like physics games. Like you could do something where like it's like bowling and like the path to get like a strike is like a solution or something like that. I don't know. I'm just like randomly
Yeah.
brainstorming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I also want to add one more layer to this. I think for astute thinkers in the audience, there's actually one caveat to this concept, which is, you know, I think some kind of scarcity needs to be involved to constrain the system. Let me elaborate. So, if I look at this concept, I would immediately just build a Python off-chain physics simulator, and I would just exhaustively run through all possible momentums in the solution space, and I'll only submit the momentums that are actual solutions. And I can easily, if I build a script like that, I can easily scout all the OG solutions. And the problem here lies in having no scarcity in compute of the blockchain, right? So once you read a smart contract, you understand the rules of the game, you build an off-chain optimizer, you found a solution, and you go to blockchain to submit it. To address this, you have to somehow tie um, the submission of solution to some kind of scarcity. This is really second level of the game. I think as a first iteration, this will be enough. As I think, but moving forward, over long term, a more interesting concept is actually modifying the game as following, right? So a solution is not just a momentum, which is a tuple that you submitted, two numbers. You have to, for a given game puzzle, you have to submit a Cairo contract that interacts with the game puzzle. So an example of this will be a game puzzle is defined by number of circles in the scene and the geometry of the boundary. That's it. But the actual instance of a puzzle can have randomly placed circles within that boundary. And so to solve the puzzle, you don't just supply a momentum because games can be initialized randomly. Um, your solution is a Cairo contract connected to this game puzzle contract, and the objective of your contract is to, given the geometries of the boundary and the number of circles in the scene that can be randomly placed, to always come up with at least a solution. Right? So your contract essentially is kind of like an AI. It detects the placement of the random circles on StarkNet, and it supplies a momentum that actually solves the puzzle. And this to me is very interesting because then solution is not just two numbers, it's a Cairo contract. So we actually encourage Cairo developers
Mm-hmm.
in this sort of concept. Yeah.
I have a small question, Guilty. So one use case that I'm thinking about using this thing is basically to create a community of Cairo developers that prove themselves as developers. So something like a proof of work, like something like doing something with, like deploy a contract or something like that, and then like by doing that, by interacting, you know, then you're getting an NFT. Do you think something
Yeah.
like that is possible?
Yeah, I think this is exactly that, right? So, viewed from a different angle, if we can deploy this game, I mean, the second iteration of this game, what it does is, um, I, as a Cairo developer, need to submit a Cairo contract, whose input is the geometry of the puzzle boundary as well as number of randomly placed circles. And the output of my contract is a um, a solution to the player circle that is guaranteed as a solution, right? And my contract will pass the test if the output is actually a solution. And the testing my contract involves sort of the puzzle contract supplying a stream of puzzle instances where each puzzle has randomly placed circles, and my contract needs to always find a solution to each of these puzzles. If I fail one, then my contract sort of fails.
Very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Very
Basically, that's it. And you also, it's interesting because then you're as a solver, I need to submit not just a Cairo contract, but a Cairo contract that can work with the sort of compute constraint of the entire puzzle contract because there's a 1 minute step a step limit within one transaction. And so it's at the same time an algorithmic challenge and a Cairo challenge, but also sort of a resource usage challenge. It's multifaceted.
great.
And it can be expanded to many different things. Basically, having this is sort of like a game, right? You have an on-chain game, and player needs to submit some kind of AI contract to interact with the game and always pass some kind of test. And the test has to be randomized, so we need a verifiable randomness coming into the game, etc. It's another component. Yeah.
Sauce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll shut up.
No, so non, I know. Do you want to talk about this, or do we want to move on to BRF? I'm open to whatever.
Yeah, I was actually just going to chime in about Guilty Goes' idea, just thinking about, um, if you have some random state as he mentioned, and then also some sort of time limit constraint on sort of the given puzzle. I think um, that would I think make the game a lot funner rather than having sort of no constraints like that.
Yeah, completely agree.
So are there? So I know you mentioned like snooker pool kind of as like a base for this or like a collision oriented physics game. Are there other sort of like I guess are there other sort of like puzzles that would fall into this category that maybe aren't physics related, or
Oh,
is this like a purely like physics oriented
I,
like
I
approach?
think I think this is not constrained to physics, but I think there are many uh, fun concepts that can use physics. For example, we can have an Angry Bird kind of puzzle where
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the input to my contract is basically the geometry of the scene as well as number of targets that I need to hit with one projectile. And my solution is just the initial velocity vector of my projectile. Yeah, and it requires physics engine to work at the back end. Well, I think this is generalizable to anything, as long as the rules of the game is enforced on chain, right? And mentors or players need to write Kyra contract to work with the rules of the game. For example, right, you can have a puzzle that is defined as a very simple concept, which is a maze, a 2D maze, and you require a player to write through contracts to the pathfinder. Right? So you have I write a Cairo that was A-star algorithm, etc., etc., and as long as the player contract can finish a um, a sequence of random puzzles within a given range of complexity, then that contract is qualified as a solution, and then that Cairo then becomes a Hall of Fame, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also,
And
I
then you have,
think
so I think this just actually encourages Cairo education by sort of, yeah, building
I
pieces.
agree.
well, does every player have to be, I could see like you create sort of a PvP, one versus one kind of game, and you're either given the option of, you know, playing the game as a human against another player, or you can submit a smart contract to play for you, like a controller. So then you could like develop over time. It would be AI versus kind of humans, um, kind of see who wins out.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm sure we can also apply for Starkwear grant, right? Because this thing will promote just Cairo education. So there's no
Yeah.
reason why it's not
Uh,
under yeah,
yeah.
spending.
I really love it. I think this is obviously like a great um project to pursue um from like you know a Matchbox and overall like darknet perspective. Um, do you Hank? Do you
Now,
want
I
to?
just want to add one more quick thought. I think this is hilarious in another sense, where I think we have many video games where you have some kind of scripting capability in the game, right, to script some kind of behavior of your pet, of your agents, etc. However, those games are not built in a homogeneous way. Right? You have some kind of C++ running in the back end, and then you have a scripting system that's for the player to interact with the game. I think this concept is interesting because both the rules of the game and the player submitted contracts are all both in Cairo, just all in Cairo. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, this stuff sounds really cool. I think just to kind of build on that idea, I think I've done some reading about is kind of offloading computation off chain and then using a zero knowledge proof to demonstrate the output of some program that you've executed off chain. And so I think for something like as complicated as some kind of physics engine where your inputs and your outputs would require some complex computation, that kind of tool would be useful to having a trustless system of verifying some like proposed solution.
That's yeah. Does so does I know we've talked there's a little bit of talk about like ZK tooling for StarkNet, not specifically the way StarkNet works, but something like a ZKP verifier on StarkNet. Do you know of anything that exists right now in that space?
As far as I understand, StarkNet is currently not able to verify zero knowledge proofs. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong about that. But I think
that was my interpretation.
Right. I just think that if you're gonna start building something as complicated as some kind of like momentum-based physics engine, where there is some degree of like non-determinism, or maybe not non-determinism, but just like complex interactions between different objects, I would imagine that it would make the most sense to perform that computation off-chain and then just use the chain to check to make sure that computation works, or that the outputs are being derived properly from the inputs. We can chat more about, I don't know what the plan for StarkNet is in terms of like some kind of ZKP verifier.
Yeah, I personally don't know, but Resend or Bull, you guys want to chime in?
Yeah, if I can just give an idea. I don't know if you are all familiar with like BattleBots, AI BattleBots codes, like battles. There are some like platforms where you write basically an AI kind of program and you battle out other players. That would be kind of cool to do something like this where if you win like the battle between the AIs and the AIs are coded on StarkNet or something like that.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. It's it strikes you as slightly different than the solve to mint thing, but maybe it's like if you're the champion, buy like a round, you get you get an NFT or something. I don't know. I like the concept. It's the concept's like really brilliantly simple in nature, though. I like that.
It allows you also to work on concepts like ranking, matchmaking, elo type stuff. I'm really excited on that, like interchangeable matchmaking and ranks.
Yeah, like so, like yeah, like you get it. Your bot would start to get like an elo, and then you know when you're the yeah, I could definitely see that. Bull, did you want to chime in? We can't hear you if you're speaking. I don't know. Okay, I think I see your thing in the general chat. No worries. So that was I really like that discussion. I think we got a lot of great ideas. Like I said, I'm gonna try to, get it, sort of summarized and get feedback on it, and maybe that will serve as sort of like a guiding principle of like where we want to go with that in terms of developing something for Matchbox to onboard Cairo devs and kind of increase Cairo education in that area. I wanted to now maybe move on to one or I don't know how much time you have, but maybe one or two other primitives. I see a VRF in your name. I are you comfortable talking a little bit about like VRF and where it stands now, what your vision for it looks like, anything like that?
Yeah, sure. So I've been sort of researching, talking to people, writing some code for randomness Oracle on StarkNet. I guess I'll kind of start from the beginning um, with regards to kind of what I'm looking for in a randomness Oracle. So I kind of think like the three characteristics it needs to really be kind of widely accepted as the go-to randomness source. Um, so one of those properties is it's got to be secure in the sense that um, on chain there needs to be a check on whatever supposed random string is submitted to the oracle that it's actually random. That's called verifiable randomness. Another is this oracle should be decentralized in the sense that there shouldn't be, only one entity that can send this randomness string to the oracle. And then also, lastly, it should be performant, where the oracle should be receiving new randomness strings often and sending it out to people to contracts that are requesting it. So, kind of with those three characteristics in mind, I eventually came across this project called DRAND, which is a sort of a distributed randomness kind of network that provides random numbers to the internet in general. There's a public API that anyone can make a call to right now to get the latest random string that's generated by the network. The network is composed of several groups and organizations. One of those being the Ethereum Foundation. So, what I liked about this DRAND project is that the randomness is already fairly secure, since they have a pretty rigorous cryptography scheme to generate the randomness. So, what sort of the effort remaining to get this DRAND randomness payload onto the blockchain. So, also let me know if you guys have questions at any point. Um, so, getting the DRAND payload on chain is a matter of doing signature verification from a given randomness payload, which requires some cryptography libraries to exist in Cairo that we can leverage. So, sort of the primary challenge and effort is writing these libraries so we can do this on-chain verification step. Once we can verify it on-chain, then I've written, you can call it a script or a bot, that's probably the easiest way to put it. We can wrap it with some fancy name if you want, but essentially all we need is just like a few DAOs, a few people running the script, either with whatever cloud provider or on your own local machine, relaying the DRAND payloads to the blockchain. So we'll just be making contract calls with this DRAND payload, and it would then get verified on chain and then be dispersed to all the other smart contracts on StarkNet that are requesting it. And I think sort of the last challenge or thing to consider is the DRAN network currently produces a random string every 30 seconds. I'm talking to some members on the DRAN team. They're looking to reduce that time span between randomized payloads to about 3 to 5 seconds. So I think this sort of DRAN based oracle that I'm proposing is going to be good for it's going to be very good for like seeding a world, seeding with a level or something. Might not be a perfect match for maybe I'm thinking like in an RPG, you know, there's like every time you do an action, there's like a percent of like a critical hit. It might not provide RNG fast enough for something like that.
Yeah, because I was thinking about like rolling a dice like in a board game, right, or something like that. Is that because I think the primary hangup with the current VRF solutions that are really on any chain is that you have to wait for the callback, and sometimes depending on certain factors, that's anywhere from 5 to 45 seconds. And if you have eventually, if you have thousands of users, right, playing a game or something like that, you want it to get to a point where you can kind of like seamlessly mimic like rolling a dice or like drawing a card, right? So I think this is 3 to 5 seconds sounds like a pretty good start to me though. What do you see as like the hang up? Like if the DRAM payload is coming every, if they get it down to every 3 to 5 seconds, does that directly translate to on-chain polls too? Or is there like a gap? I don't know if that question makes sense. Sorry, I'm just trying to like understand.
So there wouldn't be so the gap would definitely be less than the 30 seconds that's happening now. I don't know. There shouldn't be more than a 1 or 2 second gap. I mean, it really depends on the speed of the StarkNet network at that point. That'll be our bottleneck at that point as far as performance goes. So there's some, I guess, research to be done there, but I feel like we wouldn't be any slower than would only be as slow as the StarkNet blockchain itself, I think, for the most part there. You could yeah, that's like for like a single transaction. Like maybe for a given game, there's maybe a UX option to like bundle. Like if you're doing a rolling game and you need to draw 5 cards rather than clicking to draw 1, draw 2, draw 3, you do a draw 5 and then the animation takes 30 seconds or there's some just like any sort of client server situation, you can pat it around a bit, smooth things out with some UX kind of decisions.
Hey, LFG, I know you've done some VRF work, kind of.
He's just providing me support, so thank you.
Oh, okay.
LG. Unless you want to say something, but yeah. So I guess sort of the status. Well, I think with regards to the article, Dirk, I feel like this is a little self-explanatory compared to maybe the other topics, right? So I think a brief introduction, um, sort of, I guess, what I would see is like short introduction about what a VRF is, but then just mostly just I can help you out just sort of doing a brief overview of DRAND and
Yeah, I think
state of
just
that.
yeah, I think just to clarify there, like a lot of my goal is to like offload some of the like work to you guys, and like I'm fairly technically inclined, so I'm gonna try to like summarize it as best as I can, and then I may miss something here or there. Like we obviously want to be accurate, right? So I'm not gonna publish anything without members signing off on it or like contributing to it. But um, I think the goal overall for something like a VRF, right, would try to be the like try to create to or build like the go-to standard for VRF on StarkNet. And there, I think there's obviously challenges and it'll evolve, and hopefully I'm pretty confident we'll get there
Yeah.
one way or
So
the other though.
I don't want to take up, this whole space and talk like, I guess, different paths, we can take, in the medium to long term. I feel like what I'm doing right now is, I think a great first step, and I think for a lot of use cases, it's actually going to be sufficient. Um, but going, you know, taking the, if you want to do better than 3 to 5 second, whatever the DRN network lands on, I mean, we either have to bootstrap our own randomness network or convince, I guess Starkware to provide a block hash that we can use as randomness. So those are kind of the two. I'll kind of leave it there. That there's like, this isn't the final stage, I think, of this, but I think it's a significant step.
Oh yeah, definitely. Sorry, LFG. Yeah, your mic is not. I can't hear you. I don't know if other people were or not.
I'd like to chime in really quickly about the VRF stuff. Nonsense to you. So my understanding about VRF is like kind of superficial, but is the DRAND network stuff that's like off chain or is it on chain? Like it's not on Starknet itself, right?
Right. It's off chain. It's its own protocol, own network of nodes that are talking to each other. That you know, and then what we have to do is just send it onto Starknet. And it also, so that's what we would be doing. But anyone can do that, so it's not like one. It's not just gonna be me, sending this payload, but also, if we get enough users on Starknet using the VRF, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, if we could just convince. I don't know how DRAND operates, but there's no reason why the DRAND node itself couldn't emit the randomness to Oracle. But they're definitely busy. They're trying to open source stuff.
Right. So you were talking about like different approaches. Like you could use DRAND, which is like off chain, but we could also like basically bootstrap VRF on Starknet itself. And I know for a fact that some people from the influence team, like this Space MMO on Starknet, I think his username on Discord is Dark Horse Nightmare. I think he's very interested to do purely on-chain VRF on Starknet. So if that's something you're like interested in, you can like maybe try to discuss with him your approaches, and maybe you can talk a little bit about it, because I think it would be very complementary.
Yeah, I've actually been talking to him back and forth about, I guess, mostly the DRAND approach. I think, yeah, I've been talking to him. The main thing that we've kind of landed on is, or I feel that we've kind of concluded is, until Starkware just pretty much solves the problem for us, we're going to be by using having some sort of block hash property that we can tune into. We would pretty much we need the randomness to come off chain, or that's at least where I stand. I haven't, but I'm always open to hear, any other developments.
Okay, it's awesome that you've already been talking. I didn't know that, obviously, but that's cool. Yeah, so maybe you can also like take the discussion a bit into like the VRF channel we have in Discord, so other people can like read about it, and so it's easier for collaboration. But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think we were talking our talk kind of predated that a little bit, so.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I mean, as you see, he posted some links, I posted some links, so I'm sure things will, probably be continuing on in that channel.
Awesome, perfect.
I just have one comment. If any of the other members think about a particular use case that will be beneficial for him, then feel free to discuss it further, because that would be nice to develop an implementation, like a specific implementation for one of those games or something else.
Well, I have one final quick technical question. I'm not like a Cairo expert in the way the atomic transactions work, but I know like I've done DRF stuff with like Solidity and like before and like on-chain stuff, and I know that if the randomness is determined before like there's some sort of delay, right, where you don't know what you're going to get back. How does that work the same way in this instance, or like when I send a request out, I have to wait for the next flight until my like action is taken, right? Does that make sense? Sorry.
Yeah, there's a callback mechanism either triggered by the Oracle or triggered by a subsequent contract call from the client based on a timestamp or some variable.
Yeah, no, makes sense.
We're not rewriting the wheel or what have you.
Yeah.
I think we're just taking the logical first step here.
No, it makes perfect sense. Okay, did anyone else in the audience want to chime in on DRF? Okay then. Go ahead, Nam. Do you have one more thing?
Yeah, I was gonna say thanks everyone. If everyone has kind of questions about Pyro or randomness or things like that, feel free to ask.
Thanks. So we do only have 10 minutes left in this call, but if anyone is like super passionate and like dying to, talk about a primitive that they're working on and would really like to see built, I don't want to shut anybody out, but otherwise I think we'll start the closing comments and steps here.
Maybe Francesco can speak about oh, yeah.
Okay, so I think I mentioned today, and we were discussing that a lot of games we are seeing now are basically browser games, right? So, for example, I will use React, and now there's a library that published like a couple of weeks ago, But the reality is that most games and most games developers are familiar with Unity and C#, and so it would be good to start an effort to provide like a good quality .NET SDK for StarkNet, so that developers can actually start using StarkNet easily. And I think that would help some games integrate with StarkNet over, say, Polygon or other networks that can just use like the Ether.js or equivalent for .NET. And basically, I wanted to add that basically I worked for a couple of years or more on the Stellar SDK for Stellar and .NET, and so I know how to basically work on that type of library, and it was used like by Unity 3D projects, and I think a couple of games use that library, and so I kind of know what needs to be done, just now I don't have time to actually write the code for it. So if you or someone that you know wants to make this happen, I can sort of like mentor and help to get started and write that.
Yeah, sounds good. Does anyone else have any comments on that? Okay, I think Francesco, I can talk to you, or we can talk in the working group or the general chat a little more about that as well, for for details and things like that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. I like the discussion today. This is actually really helpful. This is sort of what I had in mind. I hope everyone found it interesting as I did. Like I said, I'm gonna try to like summarize a lot of the things we talked about. Try to get a document going where we can lay out like a vision of what we want to build and start from there. So that's sort of what I had planned for today. Yanni, did you want to make any closing comments? I know you had said something about the core dev role. I'll let you talk if you want. Otherwise,
not much. I think Swag had something to say about another call.
Right.
For the DAO, but
Yeah. So basically next week we are going to have another call. We will talk about some updates, specifically around fundraising for Matchbox DAO and about the foundation we are going to incorporate. And we will also talk a bit more about basically how we are going to, how the relationship between devs and their code is, which means, so obviously you can basically open source your code. There's no issue with that at all, because you own it, so you can do it in whichever way you like. But we can also talk about like incentives, which means, for example, we could build primitives such as so just an example, I don't know if anybody actually does this right now or wants to do it, but for example, some devs could build an NFT minter on StarkNet, and you could, for example, say that for each contract call, the DAO gets like a little fee or something like that. So we can talk about things like that and how you guys see it, which way you prefer and which way you want to do things like that. Because obviously the DAO is going to raise funds, and it makes sense to talk about like incentivization, because the DAO will likely also invest in other projects, and so it makes sense to talk about like how we see our business model, and what you guys think about that. And we're also going to have to talk a little bit about if we give out grants, how do we treat the grantees, and a little bit about governance and decision making in the DAO, especially because we likely won't have like a token for quite a while still, so we can't exactly do token votes. So we will have to think about how we want the governance in the DAO to work. And there's also now a content team which is working on a constitution for the DAO, which is almost finished. So we can publish that, and it outlines our vision, our values, what we believe in. You can find all of that in the Constitution channel in Discord, so you can read up on it, and you can also comment and give us your opinion if that's of interest to you. Yeah, I think that's it. We're going to announce the date for the call in like a couple of days. It's going to be next week, and we're going to have devs and the content team together because these topics concern like everybody in the DAO. And I think that's it. If anybody else has anything still on their mind, then please speak up. And if not, then we can finish the call. Okay, I guess that's it. See you next week. Thank you all.
Thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye guys, thank you.